we have been focusing on a theme that that I've referred to as the mother of all wars. Each time I say that title, I feel a little bit almost embarrassed because it sounds a little cheesy. But as I said, I can't think of anything better to describe what I really want to talk about. I'm really looking at the great controversy theme based on the way we have come to understand the truth. There is a concept that all of us are familiar with. There's a book that is written by the name of The Great Controversy, and that was probably the foundation where most of us got our ideas of what is really going on in the universe. But there are some things that we have come to understand. There are some additional insights into truth. There are some things that are not emphasized in that book and in other places where people talk about this theme. And those are some of the things that make a big difference in how we understand things. And so that is why we're going through this series of studies. And I want to reinforce the idea that many of the things that we are sharing together in this series, we are familiar with them. But one of the problems that I see, and not necessarily with any of us here, but I see it in so many Christians, is that they hold a disconnected view of the things that they believe. They believe one thing about the nature of Christ, then there's something contradictory about Jesus being the Son of God. Then there's something contradictory in the way they understand the plan of salvation. They hold a series of ideas that when you put them together, they don't make sense. And I believe that this is one of the things that turns people off to Christianity. They don't have any intelligent, systematic understanding of what is really happening. And that is why it is my hope and prayer that as we go through this series, we can connect all the dots and we can see how everything fits with everything else in a clear, precise, extraordinary way. That is my hope. And that's why I'm going through this. It is I hope that all those of us who share together in these studies, you will be so firmly rooted in this understanding that you will have a database from which you can help other people to understand, and also that they may learn to praise and uplift and glorify the name of our wonderful God and his Son. So I'm going to go to my screen. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start today by using PowerPoint. Well, the slides from my PowerPoint. Let me see. Yeah, I've been using I have quite a few things here on the screen that I need to get rid of. Just give me a second, brethren. Okay. What I'm going to do first of all is do a brief review of what we looked at for the past few weeks, just to look at the main points. And then, all right, I'm ready. Yes. Sorry about that, guys. So I just want to look at the main points of what we looked at for the past 3 weeks, and then we will move on to today's topic. So we started by looking at some foundational truths. We started from the very beginning. Now that I think about it, there's something that we should have looked at even before we came to these ideas. And sometime in the future, I'm going to go back to those things that we missed out on. But anyway, we started with these foundational truths, and we saw that number one, only God is good. I consider this one of the greatest elementary things that we need to understand. Only God alone is good. If we start here and we follow through consistently, everything comes into place perfectly. The second thing we saw, that good and evil are defined by the presence or the absence of God. In other words, where God is, there is good. Where God's personal presence is missing, there is evil. And when I use this word presence, I just want to say something. When I say the presence of God, I believe God is present everywhere. But I believe there is a sense in which God is present by his power and his abilities, but God is not present in a personal way. I mean, in other words, he's not present as a friend. His presence in a communicative and personal way is not there. So for example, where Satan is, God is there, of course, but God's personal presence is not there as he lives in you and lives in me. There's the Spirit of God as a power of God, and there's the Spirit of God as the presence of God. And what I'm saying is that good and evil is defined by the presence of God. So God is present with you and me, we're good. God is absent from you and me, we're not good. So that is how we define good and we define evil. The next point is that this is a true view of sin, as I mentioned. There are two perspectives or two principles at work in the universe, two philosophies, if I may put it that way. One is that the only way to be good is that God is to be all and in all. That's what a perfect universe means. And the alternative perspective is that God is to be feared and avoided. And this, in this black and white, simple structure, is how we understand sin and righteousness, good and evil. Everything that is negative versus everything is positive can be understood and defined in this way. These are the foundational things that we have to understand. The third thing that we looked at was that corporately, last week we spent some time looking at this, I think it was last week, we all share the same identity. And we spent some time looking at the meaning of this word. What does corporate mean? And so corporately, we all have the same identity. In other words, corporately, you and I are Adam. Corporately, you and I are humanity. Corporately, you and I are in the same place in terms of our identity. God regards all humanity as one. And that's another great foundational truth, because if we don't understand this, you will never understand God's plan of salvation. The next thing we looked at was that freedom of choice is a universal gift, and it is a right. God gave it to all intelligent beings, and it is a right that all of us have, and God will never take away this right. I mean, granted that there are some people who are born in an imbecilic state. Okay, some people are born with as well, the word I can think of is imbeciles. We would say mentally retarded. They don't have the capacity to understand things as well as the rest of us. And I know God has a way of how he will deal with people like that. But generally speaking, every person has freedom to choose, and God gave this as a gift to everyone, and everyone will have this right as long as humanity exists. I don't believe that Satan will ever be permitted to take away man's right to choose, because if he takes away man's right to choose, how then shall God judge the world? As Paul says. The fifth thing is that what arises from this is the idea we can choose our kingdom, but not our individual rights. For example, somebody cannot say, I choose to be in Satan's kingdom, but I choose the right to be good. Or I choose to be in God's kingdom, but I choose the right to do bad things. You don't make those choices, okay? I mean, I choose the right to be a sinner, but I choose to be in God's kingdom. Your status as a sinner or a saint, as a good person or an evil person, is not based on your behavior. It's based on which kingdom do you belong to. Now, these are the five foundational truths that everything that we're going to be looking at is built upon. So, choose your kingdom. Adam on the left, Christ on the right in this picture. You can choose your kingdom. And as I said, this is kind of like a slightly misleading because you don't have the choice. You don't have the choice to choose this kingdom. You don't have the choice to choose this kingdom. You were born in that kingdom. You were born in Adam's kingdom. You are not given a choice. Shall I choose Adam's kingdom or shall I choose Christ's kingdom? I'm emphasizing this because there are people who insist. Let me change the color so you can see it better. There are people who insist that we do not become, we do not become, we do not belong to any of these kingdoms when we are born. They say we are born in the middle. And then shortly afterwards, we choose which side we want. And they believe that we choose the left, we choose Adam's side. And they believe we choose based on our behavior. You choose to transgress, and so you go left. But if you choose to go right, if you choose to be obedient, you will end up on the right side. So they believe you belong to these kingdoms based on your choice to do good or evil, which is a fallacious concept. That's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches we are born into Adam. So we don't have a choice. We are born into Adam. The choice that we have is that we can choose to leave Adam and go to Christ. That's the choice we have. One choice. We don't have two choices. So I want to make that point because this folly is very prevalent in some circles. So today we move on to the next step, and today we want to look at the curse. Now, it says in Galatians 3 and verse 13, this is where the word curse comes in. All right, because we have talked about sin, we have talked about good, we have talked about evil, but today I want to refer to it under the heading of the curse because Paul uses the word curse. And that is where the curse comes into our discussion. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. This is what Paul says, the Apostle Paul. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. Because it is written, he being made a curse for us, because it is written, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. So there you have the verse. I think it may be the only verse in the Bible that refers to what Adam did and our condition as being under a curse. Well, there's another one I'm going to look at, but this is the main one of the very few verses. It refers to it as a curse. And that is why today I want us to look at this word, the curse, and to see what is implied in the curse. It has everything to do with what we are going to look at as we continue in this series of studies. So first of all, I want to ask the question, what is a curse? Paul says that Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law and that he, Christ, was made a curse for us. What is a curse? It's very often the case that when you look at popular understanding and when you look at the Bible understanding, there's a difference. Now I'm going to the dictionary and I'm going to look at what the dictionary says about a curse. And this is the popular understanding. Most of us grew up with this concept of a curse. And maybe many of us still hold to this as our understanding of what a curse is. But I'm going to show you that the biblical concept is a little bit different, or maybe a lot different. According to the Oxford Dictionary, one of the most respected dictionaries in the English language, in English circles, it's a solemn utterance. It's intended to provoke a supernatural power, to invoke, sorry, not to provoke. It's intended to invoke a supernatural power to inflict harm. And I want to underline this. It's invoking, and to invoke means you make a strong appeal, or you call upon, or you bring a power out of a supernatural element to inflict harm or punishment on someone or on something. That's the popular understanding of a curse. And another dictionary says basically the same thing. Vocabulary.com, these are online dictionaries, so I'm just giving you the titles of the places. Vocabulary.com, it says an appeal to some supernatural power to inflict evil on someone or on some group. Now, if you come to the Bible with this idea that it is calling upon a supernatural power to do evil, then you're going to be confused when the Bible says that the curse of the law fell upon all of us. Because if you think about it, the curse of the law is the law of God. So if it's the curse of the law, then who could have cursed you for breaking the law? It must have been God. So it means that God is the supernatural power who inflicts harm and punishment upon you. God made a solemn utterance. Look at the first definition. God made a solemn utterance intended to invoke his supernatural power to do you harm or punishment. And this is how most people understand the plan of salvation. God put a sentence of harm or punishment on you, and then his son came to take that punishment, to take that harm upon himself in order to set you free. So this is how most people understand what happened. And of course, you can see that in this paradigm, you do learn to appreciate Jesus, and you do learn to be a little wary of God, a little fearful of God, a little cautious about God, because he is the one who put the curse upon you. And Jesus is the one who became a curse, who took the curse to set you free. It makes you love Jesus, it makes you respect Jesus, but you are a little bit uncertain about the Father, or maybe a lot uncertain about the Father. This idea comes out in the Bible to some extent, and especially in the Old Testament. Here you see Balaam, a visual depiction of Balaam, and standing behind Balaam is Balak, King Balak, because Balak sent for Balaam to curse Israel. In Numbers 22 and verse 11, he says, "Behold, there is a people come out of Egypt which covereth the face of the earth. Come now, curse me them." What is he saying to Balaam? I want you to call upon your supernatural power. I want you to call upon the supernatural powers that you have access to. And I want you to call a sentence of evil, a sentence of disaster upon these people. He had the concept of a curse that most people have. He says, now curse me them. Peradventure, I shall be able to overcome them and drive them out. So you see that Balak had the same concept of a curse that most people have today. There's something he didn't understand. This is how most people understand a curse. You know, a witch or a wizard maybe points the finger at you, casts a spell, and brings evil upon you. Always the idea is that somebody has access to some supernatural power, and you invoke that power, you call upon that power, you exercise the power of that supernatural being in the background to bring evil upon somebody. Some people believe God did this, but most people believe when they talk about a curse generally, they believe it's some kind of evil person like a witch or a witch doctor or a wizard or an obia man, as they say in Jamaica, some kind of sorcerer. Now, let me go to the Bible for a moment, and let us look at the biblical concept. Now, we're going to see what the Bible says about a curse. And the biblical idea is what Paul means when he says Christ is made a curse for us. When he says that the curse of the law came upon us. So we just saw in Numbers 22 and verse 11, where Balak was called to curse these people that came out of Egypt. Now, I want you to look at something that Balaam said. Even Balaam, the man who was being paid to curse Israel. Look at something he says. In Numbers 23, the following chapter, Numbers 23 and verse 8, Balaam says, "How shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied?" Even Balaam had a reputation that anybody he cursed would be cursed, and anybody he blessed would be blessed. Now Balaam gives King Balak some insight into what is going on. In verse 7, look at what he says. He took up his parable and he said, Balak, the king of Moab, hath brought me from Aram out of the mountains of the east, saying, Come, curse me, Jacob, and come, defile Israel. That's what he was called to do. That's what he was being paid to do. But he says, how shall I curse whom God has not cursed? How shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied? So the first thing you understand here is that the power of a curse does not rest in the one who speaks the curse. The power of the curse is not in you. The power of the curse is in God. In this case, in God. Somebody might say, well, wouldn't it also be in Satan if it's a negative curse? I'll talk about that in a moment. But first of all, I want you to see that the person who is doing the cursing, whether it's a prophet or a wizard or whoever you might want to call him, no human being has power in himself to curse anybody. It has to come from a supernatural source. Now, this supernatural source, I'm going to show you, is not what we think it is. Let's look at what Jesus says to the Jews in Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 23, I beg your pardon, 23. I'm going to read a few verses here. Look at these words of Christ. And if you look at these words, they are the most striking curse. They express the most striking curse that ever came upon a set of people. Jesus said, you serpents, you generation of vipers. His very words reek of condemnation. But is this how it is? Let's read on. He says, how can you escape the damnation of hell? These are striking, strong words. If somebody says this to you, almost like before the words come out of the person's mouth, you're already lost. Jesus goes on to say, wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you shall kill and crucify. Some of them shall you scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. He goes on to say, all the blood upon you may come, all the righteous blood shed upon the earth. But in the last two verses is what I really want to focus on, or the second to last two verses. He says, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Verse 38, behold, your house is left unto you desolate. These words, even though Jesus does not use the word curse, but these words, they carry the intent of a curse. They sound like a curse. But if you look at what happens here, you understand what is happening. Jesus says, your house is left unto you desolate. And the word desolate means, of course, empty. Now remember something. What we looked at the beginning, we saw that there are two existences in the universe, two places in the universe. I could go back to I have to go back a little ways to bring back up the picture, but let me go back and just remind us of it. Remember this graphic, remember this image. This is how we define all good and all evil in the universe. Where God is all and in all, it is good, it is blessed. Where God is feared and avoided, it is cursed. Where God is missing, there is no element of good. There's no guarantee of safety. Everything is negative. And if you go back to what we are looking at here, you can see that this is what Jesus is saying. He says to the Jews, your house is left unto you desolate. Desolate of what? In what sense was the house of the Jews left desolate? Obviously, he's saying your house is desolate of the Spirit of God. God's Spirit is about to leave this place. And because God's Spirit is about to leave this place, this is what Jesus says. all the righteous blood that was shed upon the earth is going to come upon you. This is why he called them, he said to them, how can you escape the damnation of hell? It sounds like a curse, but it is not Jesus who is cursing these people. Their curse is because they have turned away from God. This is what a curse is. That's why Balaam could say, how shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? If God didn't turn away from them, how am I going to bring evil upon them? If God has not turned against them, what can I do? So now we understand the nature of a curse. It's a condition where people have rejected God, and consequently, God has departed from them and left them to their own devices. You will remember that Balaam told Balak how to curse Israel eventually. When he found that he couldn't curse Israel, he encouraged Balak to send some of his Moabitish women into the Israelite camp. And they cursed them. Israel cursed themselves because they turned to these heathen women, these worldly women, and they started having relations with them, and they turned their hearts away from God. So Balaam could not curse Israel, but Israel ended up cursing themselves. Thousands of them died as a consequence of turning away from God. And that lesson is there forever, because the women of Moab are all around in the world today, and they are still a snare to the people of God. And while God will not curse us, we can end up cursing ourselves. I guess that's a warning for the men, but I know the women have their own their own vices as well, their own temptations as well. And probably the best example of what I'm saying that we can find in the Bible, in my opinion, is what Noah did. It's very clear from what Noah did that the biblical understanding of a curse that I'm trying to put across, that's exactly what it is. Now, here is what happened. It says, Noah began to be, in verse 20, Genesis chapter 9. Noah began to be a husbandman and planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. Now he saw his father naked, and he went and told his brothers. I just suspect that something more happened, because it's hard to believe that just seeing his naked father and telling his brothers, I don't see anything so terrible about it, but I suspect there's more to it. I'm not going to talk about that this morning, but look at what it says. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him. Something went down there. And he said, cursed be Canaan. Now, whenever I'm doing a study like this, I like to ask the question, who was it that Noah cursed? And if they're not actually looking at the verse, looking at the statement, most people will say Noah cursed Ham. Most people will say Noah cursed Ham, because your mind connects what Ham did with a curse. But the Bible does not say Noah cursed Ham. Noah cursed Canaan. Canaan wasn't there. Canaan didn't look at Noah. The three brothers were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Canaan didn't do anything. And yet Noah awakes from his wine and he curses Canaan. And he says, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. Now, there is a temptation to believe that Canaan was another name for Ham, but this is not true. Let me go and see if it's in chapter 10. I'm going to show you who Canaan was, and you will understand. It says in chapter 10, verse 6, and the sons of Ham, there were Cush and Mizraim and Phut and Canaan. Canaan was the son of Ham. Go back to the previous chapter. It says that Noah said, cursed be Canaan. Ham did something and Noah cursed his son. That is one of the most unjust and unreasonable things you can find in the Bible. If you think, if you think of it in this superficial way. But what does this teach us? It teaches us what I tried to say before. A curse is not God putting something upon you. A curse is somebody bringing something evil upon himself. He does it by turning away from God, by separating yourself from God. You bring evil circumstances into your life. What happened here is that based upon the character that was in Ham, Ham did something. I'm not quite sure what it is, but we can talk about that another time. But Ham did something, and when Noah woke up, he knew what Ham had done, and it was something that made him understand that this son of his, this son named Ham, had rejected God, and the Spirit of God came upon Noah too, and Noah said, "What this man has done is going to affect his children. It's going to affect his children." And you can see that in life. When you have a bad parent or bad parents, the children come up and they have the same bad ways. This is why you can look at this generation of people and you can see the children are lawless and mannerless, and they have no principles because they grew up in homes where the parents have rejected God. And this is to increase and multiply with the passing of every year because this world has rejected God. And the children of these God rejecting people are going to become more and more evil. That is the reality of life. So he says, "Cursed be Canaan," not because Canaan did anything, but the boy is going to suffer for the condition of his father. This is how a curse works. And this you can understand this if you look at what God says in the third commandment, I believe it is, or the second commandment. God says you must not make any graven image. Exodus 20 and verse 5, you must not make any graven image, and so on. And he says, "For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God." And hear what he says, and this is so unfair and unjust, except that you understand what he means. "Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children." God says this is what he does. He causes the children to suffer for the sins of their fathers. So unfair until you understand. God does not curse children because of what their fathers did, but he says this happens unto the third and the fourth generation of them that hate me. Those who turn away from God, those who reject God, you bring this upon yourself and upon your children to the third generation, the fourth generation, and as long as they continue to reject God. Until somebody can break this curse, it remains upon you and your family. This is what God means. Now, God was in the habit all the time of taking the blame for things like this because he's God Almighty. So when Pharaoh hardened his heart, God said, "I hardened Pharaoh's heart." God never does anything evil. God never blames and judges one person for what another person did. No. But God is telling us the truth that the sins of the father affect their children. And this is the nature of a curse. So let me go back to my graphics here. The biblical concept of a curse then is that a curse is a sentence of disaster. That's what it is. Somebody speaks the curse. That's the first thing about a curse. The second thing is that it affects future generations. It's upon the children and the children's children. It fell upon Canaan, the son of Ham. It affects future generations. The third thing we saw, that it is not based on God bringing evil upon somebody. It's based on foreknowledge. A prophet may say, I may say, I just said the next generation on this earth is going to be worse. What, am I a prophet? No, but I understand the principle of consequences. I understand the way a curse works. I understand that when nations come upon, people come upon, and they drive God out of the society. I understand. Man says we are entering a great new age of human enlightenment. I see an age of terrible disaster, unruly, uncontrollable, loose, wild people. who will be a danger to themselves and to all around them. That's what I see. Because the curse of Adam has multiplied and increased and is upon all of us. I see a question. Why was just one child of Ham cursed and not all of them? Well, if you look at who was cursed, Canaan was cursed, but look at the rest of them. Mizraim was cursed. Cush, Mizraim was one of the children. Cush was one of the children, and I forget the name of the other ones. Now, Cush was Africa. Basically, they were the dark-skinned people from Africa. Mizraim was Egypt, and Canaan was the people that lived around the Israelites. If you look at all of them, they became strong enemies of Israel. Well, at least Egypt was, and Canaan was. And I think we all can know how Africa. I'm not going to touch on Africa because it's a very sensitive subject to many people, but Africa had a mixture of some of the great civilizations, but it also had a mixture of some of the most debased and degenerate people. So I think you can see that those nations that reject God through their grandfather Ham, and I'm not saying it was all of them, but many of them, they became great enemies of God's people, and they became people that Satan had a great influence on how those societies developed. I won't go any further on that because, as I know, it can be a sensitive subject, but since you asked. So I want to point out that humanity, all of humanity came under this curse. Look at what God said in Genesis 3 and verse 19. Adam disobeyed God, and people think Adam just took a fruit. Why would you bring a sentence upon somebody who takes a fruit? Adam didn't just take a fruit. The fruit was a way for Adam to reject God or to remain with God or to choose somebody else. God says, if you choose my enemy, you automatically reject me. God told him, don't do this. And the enemy came and said, do this. Man chose Satan above God. Man chose Satan's principle of government. Satan's principle is you don't need to be under God's control. You can govern yourself. That's Satan's principle. You can be like God without God. And God said to man, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you go back to the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. God cursed man, but he didn't curse man. He was just telling him what is going to happen now that you have rejected me. As a matter of fact, man would have died that very day, but God in mercy gave him a little lifetime. God gave man a lifetime because God was going to provide a way for man to come back to him. And in order to take advantage of that time, man had to have a lifetime. But otherwise, he would have dropped dead that very day. Because how can you live if you turn away from God? How can you have life without God? When man rejected God, he didn't just reject God's government, he rejected God's life. And if God had taken man where man put himself that day, man would have returned to the dust. But God gave him, we might call it a time of probation. He gave him an opportunity so that over time he could find his way back to God. God is going to provide a way, an incredible way, an impossible way, it seems, for man to come back to God. So the whole human race, remember what we looked at before. We looked at the principle of inheritance, consequences falling upon the next generation. We saw that we have a thing called corporate identity, where all of us as a family were born into Adam's race. When Adam fell, all men fell. We see that principle. A curse not only affects your generation, but your future generation. You have brought something into the race that affects everybody who is born there. And what Adam gave us as his inheritance was a life without God. That is what Adam gave us. We were born into a race where God is not in control. That is the problem of humanity. That is the disease that must be fixed. And I want to make the point that people think that the problem is that, Adam put a kind of seed inside of man. I saw this in some Christian teaching, that Adam, a seed was put in Adam, and when Adam had relations with his wife, that seed is passed on to somebody else, and it's passed on to somebody else, and they believe it's something Adam infected us with, but that is not true. What Adam did was deprive us of something. We were missing something. Not that something was put in us, but that something was taken from us. What was taken from us is the one thing that can make anybody good. It was God. It was the life of God. Adam deprived his children of this privilege, and that is why we are born in this carnal state. For where God is, everything is good. Where God is feared and rejected, everything is evil. And we were born into such a race, in such a planet. That's the problem. Now, I just want to make sure that we see clearly that this is what the curse really is. There are two things that came as a result of this curse. Now, to understand the curse, we looked at it already, but just to certify that what I'm saying is true, I'm going to go to a verse, maybe the last place in the Bible where the word curse is mentioned. Revelation 22 and verses 3 and 4. Look at this. Here it tells you, and there shall be no more curse. Why? Why will there be no more curse? Because the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it. That's why there's no more curse. So what is the curse? The curse is where the throne of God and the Lamb are not. Do you see it, brothers and sisters? Do you see the beauty of it? The throne of God and of Jesus Christ the Lamb are in me, so I'm no longer under the curse, but the world is still under that curse. But in the world to come, there'll be no more curse, because the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. Hallelujah. This is the beauty of what it means to be free from the curse, brothers and sisters. So this verse, if no other verse, this verse tells you clearly what is the curse. The curse is because the throne of God and the Lamb are not here. But in a sense, it is here because God and Christ says they will come and make their home in us and with us. So we have escaped the curse. But where this is not true, people remain under that curse. And that curse is a sentence of disaster. And this is what Jesus had to deliver us from. We'll see how as we proceed. The second thing about the curse was, well, Paul mentions in Hebrews chapter 2 that for as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. That's the second thing about the curse. We were under bondage. We were under the power of the alternative government, two governments in the universe. We were under the power of Satan's principle of government. Self-government ruled us. And because of this, all our lives, we were in fear of death. We were in bondage. But Jesus took our flesh and blood to save us from this bondage and deliver us from the power of Satan. So we are no longer afraid of death or the devil. It's so beautiful when you understand it, brothers and sisters. So, the nature of the curse is that those under the curse are under Satan's government, his principle of government, which is self-rule. That's Satan's government. It's not that Satan goes around and tells you what to do. You are ruled by self, and self tells you to do exactly what Satan would want you to do. Because without God, you have nothing but self. And if Satan were to die tomorrow, you'd still be just as evil, because evil is the absence of God. It's not the presence of Satan, it's the absence of God that makes something evil. Take away Satan and put him to death, and where God is absent will still be just as evil. I hope we understand this. It's to be separated from God. This is what the curse is all about. Now, before I go any further, I just want to look at a verse in the Bible that explains how to break a curse. Genesis 27, verse 40. Now, it's an interesting little verse, but it gives us an insight, because this is where Jacob came to his father, Isaac, and robbed his brother Esau of the birthright. And when Isaac blessed Jacob, he thought he was blessing Esau. And so he spoke all kinds of good things over Jacob. Actually, it was God speaking through Isaac, even though Isaac was doing it unwittingly. But God was speaking through Isaac because he was foretelling the future. He was telling how it would be in the future because God knew that in the future, Jacob would become his special, Jacob would become his special ambassador, Jacob and his descendants. But look at what Isaac did for Jacob. Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him your Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. So Isaac told Jacob that his brothers would be his servants and that he would be Lord over all of them, thinking he was speaking to Esau. But it was God speaking through Isaac, foretelling the future. Isaac went on to say, With corn and wine have I sustained him. What shall I do now unto thee, my son? Speaking to Esau. And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. I tell you, Isaac had intended to give Esau all these blessings, but somehow, through the trickery of his mother, but I think in God's sovereignty, the words spoken came upon Jacob because God was foreseeing the future. But listen to what Isaac says in verse 40. By thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. But look at this statement now. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Notice the words, when you have the dominion. What Isaac was saying to Esau, and again, I'm telling you, it was God speaking through Isaac. Isaac is saying, when you are able to overcome your brother, you are going to break this curse that is upon you. You are going to break this bondage that you are going to be his servant. Then you will break this yoke off his neck, off your neck. So it brings out the point that you can break a yoke. But how do you break a yoke? You must take, under the conditions of the curse, you must take the curse and you must break the curse. You must defy the condition of the curse. And let me tell you what I mean. When Noah said to Ham, Cursed be Canaan. Why was Canaan cursed? He was cursed because he followed in the footsteps of his father Ham. But suppose Canaan had taken a position that he would not be like his father. Suppose Canaan had been able to step aside from the evil course of his father and take a different direction. Would the curse of Ham have fallen upon him? The answer is no. If he could break the curse, if he could break the circumstances, he would not have the curse fall upon him. And that is what Isaac was saying to Jacob. In order to break Isaac was saying to Esau, in order to break a curse, you need to be under the conditions of the curse and to break free from those conditions. And in the future, we are going to see how this applies to Christ. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it with that thought. Now, why did God allow man to be tempted? Let's just understand this. Why? This is a question people ask all the time. Why? Because man was good, man was happy, man was in charge of the earth. Why allow man to be tempted? Why allow evil to come upon a person who has never been exposed to evil? Well, let's look at the reason. First of all, man was not created with a choice. Man was created united with God. And I mean by this that, if I can use myself as an example, I was not born with a choice whether I wanted to be an American or a Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica. I didn't have a choice. I was not given a choice. I was born here. Adam and Eve were not given a choice when they were created, do you want God or do you want Satan? They were born, they were created, I'm sorry, they were created united with God. They were created good. God didn't create two people and then he said, all right, now that you are created, which side do you want? They were not given a choice. They were created good. God said everything he had created was very good, including Adam and Eve. This means that they were created united with God. The second thing, it was God's decision. God made that choice. Now, remember, man's free will was not involved. Man never made a choice. And yet at this time, remember, at this time, this was the condition of the universe. There were two governments contending in the universe. The one that is in the yellow, representing God's government. God says, this is the way to happiness. This is the way to life. The other one, in Jamaica, we would call it hurry come up. Just come on the scene, inexperienced and unaware. But nobody understood anything, and so it had the capacity to deceive these people who had never seen evil. All that Satan says is, you need to be free to make your own decisions and choices. You don't need to be under somebody's domination. Two philosophies. Which one is better? Nobody knows. Nothing has been proven. Nothing has been tested. And so two people come up in the universe, brand new. They need also to make their choice. God has to give Satan what I would call the privileges for Satan. God is fair. God says, I'm giving you the right to demonstrate what is true and what is false. Well, I'm not going to get off here. Anyway, so Satan was given the right to present his alternative because God is fair. And because God is fair, God warned Eve about it. God warned Adam and Eve. He told Adam and Eve that they should not eat of the fruit. He told them that there was danger. He told them that they would die. But at the same time, he gave Satan the right. I don't know how long God talked to them, but I know God warned them and God told them, don't do it. And I know God showed them his love and God made them know that he was their creator and he warned them. And here comes a talking snake who never created them, who they don't know. And in one moment, he deceives them into going against God. I think God was fair. I think God gave them fair warning and he gave Satan a fair chance to present his government. Satan never said, this is another government I'm showing you. Satan never said, I'm God's enemy. Satan simply said, do you know you can live happier if you don't obey God? Do you know that you can rise to a higher place if you don't obey God? He was presenting his manifesto. He was presenting the manifesto of his kingdom without going into details about all the background issues that were involved. And that's how Satan often comes. He just comes and presents something beautiful, all right? He presents to you as a man a beautiful woman, well endowed, and very alluring and attractive. And all you can think about is what pleasure it will be to be with this person. He doesn't show you the bite at the end of the road. He doesn't show you what happens when all the evil corresponding things come into it and you begin to suffer the consequences. And that's how he operates. And that's how he operated with Adam and Eve. So in fairness, it was fairness that caused God to do this. Man was given a free choice. So I want to emphasize the place of free will. There's a set of Christians that are called Calvinists. Calvinists. Because John Calvin was the person who promoted and popularized the idea that we are not free. We don't have free will. I'm going to see if I can explain why he came to this conclusion. Okay? He says if we are free, then we have the power to decide where we are going to be. And so it's not God's grace alone, because I can choose to step away from God's grace and I can be lost by my choice. So he says this means that salvation is in my hand. And if salvation is in my hand, then it is not all of God's grace. So he says, God's grace is everything. So because God's grace is everything, even the power to choose is not ours. God gave Jesus to die for us. God provided salvation, and God chooses us to be saved. So everything is of grace. The problem is you ask the question, what about those who are not saved? That is also God's choice. So there's no grace for them. So it presents a picture, a horrific picture of God, who is simply the great manipulator of the universe. What we believe is referred to as Arminianism. Arminius believed in free will. It's also the belief of many. Christendom is kind of divided into two. You have Calvinists and you have Arminians. We are Arminians. We believe in free will. We believe that God did everything to save us. But one thing is in our power. We have one thing only, one great thing that makes us hold the decisive power, and it is free will. We can say to God, you did everything for me, but I choose that I don't want it. God gives this to us because it is the only way for a universe that remains happy forever. We're not going to talk more about that today, but that's the basic idea. So the role of free will. Notice what happened. Free will set man free from God. Okay, I use the word free. Set man free. Because we had free will, we had the ability to tell God, we don't want you. Because she had free will, because they had free will, Adam and Eve stepped away from God. So we were free from God, but actually we were free from God, but we became slaves forever. We became slaves to ourselves. We became slaves from sin, but it was because we were free. That is the power of free will. So man had the freedom to step away from what was good, and he walked over to the evil side. That's what free will gave us. Man exercises free will. And when one man did it, all of us ended up there over on the evil side. So we could say free will set man free from God. And I'm going to say that free will also kept man bound to Satan. Because look at the same picture. We have man now on the evil side, and what does man have to do? Man has to choose to exercise his free will and to go back over on the good side. But he can't do it. Man cannot do it. Man cannot go back to the good side. Once he has come over to the evil side, man is stuck on the good side. Remember what on the evil side. Remember what we said at the beginning. We can choose our kingdom, but we cannot choose what we do in that kingdom. If we are in the evil kingdom, we are evil. If we are in the good kingdom, we are good. Adam and Eve were in the evil kingdom, and I'm going to show you what this means. God had to respect man's choice. God is not a dictator. God is not a bully. So if man chooses that he wants to be on the evil side, God has to respect that choice. If man is to come back to God, God cannot force man to come back. Man has to come back of his own free will. Man has to make that choice. But here's the point. Here's the problem. Without God's spirit, man will never choose God. Let's just go quickly to the Bible, and let me show you where the Bible teaches this. I know I'm over time. I'm going to have to be just a little bit over time today because I want to finish the thoughts that I have here. First of all, remember the corporate principle. Romans 5 and verse 12. By one man sin entered the world, and death by sin. So death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. When one man sinned, all sinned. Verse 18. As by the offense of one, judgment came upon all men to condemnation. There's that corporate principle. But here is the consequence of the curse. Romans 8 and verse 7. Look at this. Where are we now? Where is humanity now? Now that Adam and Eve have put us under the curse, where is humanity? Here's where humanity is. The carnal mind, the mind of the natural man is enmity against God. We are afraid of God and we are separated from God. This carnal mind is enmity against God. Why would you turn to God when you're afraid of him? Why would you go back to God when you are not comfortable in his presence? This is the condition of the carnal mind. And this is why man cannot turn back to God. Man could leave God. Man could not go back to God. Nobody could go back to Adam's place to choose again on behalf of the human race. The carnal mind is not subject to the law of God, and it cannot be. So, God has to respect man's decision. So, how are we to escape from this dilemma? All humanity is separated from God. Man is not capable of doing good. I saw this, I don't know if it was a book or a course, but it's apparently by some Indian guru. And I want you to look at what it says. Freedom from evil thoughts. Here you find an example of somebody who is born carnal, born into the carnal family, and he plans to go by a program to make you free from evil thoughts. How long do you think he's going to be trying? Well, I'll tell you what the world has proven. 6,000 years is not long enough. This girl here may be a little bit more realistic. This is a bit more realistic. She says, today I will think evil thoughts and try not to say them out loud. That's how most of us operate. That's how people who are in Adam's race, that's how they operate. Today I will think evil thoughts. You cannot help that. The carnal mind cannot help thinking evil thoughts. The best you can do is that you will try not to say them out loud. And most of the time you will fail anyway. But that's where Satan has, that's where Adam put us. And that's what it means to be under the curse. You cannot go back to God. It's impossible. So all humanity is separated from God. Man is not capable of doing good. Satan's principle governs humanity, the principle of self-rule. Salvation's great principle, God works on the same plan, the same pattern as how we were lost. God takes us to salvation by the same pattern. And what I'm going to say now, we will look at in much greater detail in the future. But let me just quickly leave on a hopeful note. One man acts on behalf of the entire race. We were lost because of one man. So God's plan is to reverse the same thing that happened, reverse it by the same method. Reverse Adam's action. The first Adam and the last Adam. God made a second Adam. Instead of trying to save everybody in the human race one by one, instead of saying, David, I put you where Adam was, try to get back to the other side. I can't. I was born with a carnal mind. I have to choose God, and I cannot choose God without God. And in Adam, I'm not entitled to God. I'm not entitled to any blessing from God because Adam cut us off from God and put us under the curse. There has to be a different way. What God did was give us a last Adam, one who had the capacity to reverse what Adam did. That's what he did. One man rejected God, one man chose God. All men received the life of the first Adam. In the second Adam, all who believe, not all men, all who believe receive his life. So there's a difference. In the case of the first Adam, everybody who is born gets his life. But in the case of the second Adam, it's only who will accept the second Adam. It's only who will believe in the second Adam. It's not everybody, or else everybody will be making it back into paradise. But only some make it because only some believe. Provision is made for everybody, but only some people benefit from it. Under the first Adam, everybody is separated from God. Under the last Adam, all believers are joined to God, so we are no longer under the curse. Somebody defeated the enemy, and we have become a part of that person. So that victory over the enemy, that victory over the circumstances of the curse, it becomes ours. So the first Adam is of the flesh. All born of the flesh are here. All humanity is one flesh. And the last Adam is of the spirit. All born of the spirit are here. The new humanity is one spirit. In Adam, all die. In Christ, all who are born again shall be made alive. Praise the Lord.